What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Hope everybody's doing good today or whatever time you guys are checking this show out. Greatly appreciate you guys being here with us today. Coming a little bit later, you're not going to be able to tell the difference because by the time this episode comes out, it'll be Friday, one way or another, regardless of what time I record this on Thursday. As you can see, I'm just kind of kicking back in this one. I'm going to take it easy. It's time we kind of take it easy for a game, I guess, not necessarily the players, but for the show here. We're just going to take it easy. Kicking back, going through everything. The internet's being slow today, so I'm still taking it seriously, and we're still going to do it. But like I say, we're just going to kick back and just kind of take it easy because I feel like this is an opportunity for Georgia this weekend not to kick back and take it easy, but after this game this week, we hit the bye, and Georgia gets the opportunity to do exactly that. Kick back and take it easy for a week. We get some guys healthy. We get some guys back in the rotation. Hopefully come through this game unscathed. You know, that's the biggest thing I think always, week in and week out, is can we come into this game and get out of this game without having a bunch of injuries? And that's the hope. That's the hope coming into this game. You got Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt coming to you, started the season off strong. Have not been as strong in the past couple of games. They looked really good halfway through the game against Ole Miss last week. I got to give them credit there. Can they keep that going? I don't know. I really don't know. We're going to see. We're going to see. Is the Georgia of Kent State and Missouri going to show up? Or is the Georgia of Oregon, of Sanford, of South Carolina, and even the second half against Auburn? What version of Georgia are we going to see when Vanderbilt comes to town at 3:30? To play Georgia at Sanford Stadium in Athens. Glad we got another good home game here, and looking forward to seeing what the Dawgs can do. Again, we hope we get the ladder as far as the team that we see show up, and I don't doubt that Georgia's going to show up ready for this ball game. Again, luckily 3:30. We don't have a 12 o'clock kick in this one. The biggest thing I think is we can't be looking forward to that bye next week, and I think Georgia is ready. I think Kirby's going to have the guys ready. I think they're also ready for that break as well. But you got to get there, and you want to be at that, not necessarily number one ranking that we kind of talk about week in and week out, but you definitely want to be in that undefeated position coming into the bye, coming into the second half of the season that is much, much more stout than the first half of the season. Again, there's just a little bit of easier games in there. This is what we're doing in this episode. We're going to try to have a little bit of fun with it this episode, breaking down the Vandy game as we do week in and week out, going through the keys of the game, doing our picks, predictions on the game, and everything like that. Running through some of the other big games around the country. Another week of really good games coming in around the country that we're going to run through. But we're also going to take a look back at our preseason predictions, see how we are now that we're at the halfway mark of the season, see where we stand on some of those. And we're also going to look back at the college football playoff prediction that we did at the beginning of the season as well. Obviously, we said week in and week out that was more likely going to change. Haven't changed anything. Have not gone back to that at all. I still feel pretty decent about the four teams that I chose at the beginning of the season. We're just going to kind of revisit that and take a look at it and see where we look right now. Again, I think we're really close to that as far as what we look at right now. And we're going to see. We're going to see what that looks like. And then wrap things up with some Twitter polls that we did earlier in the week, or earlier in the day, I should say, really, because most of the time I put that up on the day that I do the show. Sometimes I put one up a little bit earlier. But we'll run through a few of those things before we wrap up the show today. But again, I greatly appreciate you guys being here. Let's go ahead and jump straight to that Vanderbilt preview. All right, getting to it here. I need to pull my volume up on our audio here. So getting to it, you're going to see me kind of looking off the side here, looking at the phone. I can't get it to pull up on my computer for whatever reason. Everything is being extremely slow tonight. So we're going to just deal with what we can. Georgia comes in this one, big favorite. I think Georgia, last I looked, like a 38-point favorite coming into this one? Yeah, 38-point favorite coming into it. Has not lost to Vanderbilt since that opening season of Kirby Smart's starting tenure here at Georgia, that back in 2016. The Dawgs have taken care of business week in and week out. Georgia having a 98.6% chance to win this one. The over-under on it, I didn't even get that to pull up earlier either. Everything's just really slow. Vanderbilt comes into this one 3-3, started the season undefeated 3-0 against Hawaii and a couple of other teams, and have just gone cold. Have gone cold since then again. Played really well last week. I do again want to give them credit. They played very well last week against Ole Miss, actually having the lead at the half. Before late in the third quarter, Ole Miss started to actually gain momentum and take the lead back, and they never looked back from that point forward. But again, just giving credit to Vandy and that they looked good in the first half of that, and a lot of what Georgia or which version, as we said off the top, a lot of that version is going to determine how this game is going to be for into the first quarter, into the half, third quarter, even go into the fourth quarter. We weren't supposed to be in that ball game against Missouri. Weren't supposed to at all, and we didn't take a lead in that game until 4 minutes left. 4 minutes. So, like I've started to say week in and week out, we're just not going to overlook a team. Over-under on this one's 58.5. We'll see if we reach it again. We'll get to the predictions here coming up in a minute. Right now, the head-to-head on it, points per game, Georgia's still looking pretty good in this one, 39.5. As we looked at it earlier, that's 18th in the country. We still sit at 4th on defense, only giving up 10.7 points a game. But this is going to be the big kicker in this game, I think. Offensively, yards per game, Georgia right now is averaging 517.8 as opposed to Vandy's 397 or 379.8. Vanderbilt's still actually putting up a lot of yards, but this is the big difference in this one, and this should be the difference in this game. Georgia only giving up 263.3 yards per game. Very good, whereas Vandy is giving up almost exactly what, not exactly, but pretty close to what Georgia averages game in and out offensively. That's 479.5 yards, and they are allowing over 325 yards, 324 through the air, 155 on the ground. Let's see if Georgia can capitalize on that because we averaged 320 in the air, 197 on the ground. Obviously, last week was a huge ground and pound game. I got a feeling we're going to see a lot more of that too. But Vanderbilt's pass defense, not good. Not good at all. Georgia giving up 173.5 on through the air, 89.8 on the ground. Still dominant defense as far as that goes. Georgia only giving up, like we just said a second ago, 10.7 points a game. Vandy giving up 36.8 so far through the season. Vanderbilt's last few games, unfortunately, again, they had to play Alabama a couple of weeks ago. You lose 55-3, and then you lose to Wake Forest. So they actually, I guess, technically started 2-0 before losing to Wake Forest and then picking up another win before playing Alabama and Ole Miss. 2 top 10 teams. It's crazy. They got a pretty rough schedule coming into this one. 3 games in a row they're going to play a top 10 team. You got Alabama 2 weeks ago, Ole Miss last week, and now you get Georgia this week. So you're playing the number 2 team in the country at that time, the now number 3 team. Number 9 team in the country now, Ole Miss, what were they ranked last week? 10, 11, something like that maybe. And now you get the number 1 team in the country. So pretty rough shape for Vandy to have to come into this one. But again, I don't really have too much of a fear or concern coming into this game. I just really feel like the biggest deal in this is Georgia come in heavy and on fire. Let's just go ahead and jump to the keys of the game and what I think it's going to take for Georgia to win this one. Don't think it's going to take too much, but offensively as we do week in and week out, the biggest thing I think is you got to protect the football. We've been putting the ball on the ground a lot. Offensively, a lot of that coming from Stetson. Dropping the ball. Running backs have had a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's Stetson's just got to hold on to the ball. We've got to protect the football. Establish the run game. That's another one. We did that last week. It took into the second half before we really got rolling on that run game, and also offensively in general, because even Stetson Bennett didn't have but like 25 yards in the first half passing, and he ended up obviously coming alive in that second half. Still no touchdowns through the air. I would like to see some of that, but that's not necessarily a key to the game. But let's also get it going early. Let's get it going early instead of coming into this game kind of sleepwalking like we did in the Kent State game, like we did in that Missouri game. Get things rocking and rolling early. Let's take an early lead, and let's jump on top of them quickly and early. And I think a lot of that, as long as we're protecting the ball and establishing the run game, I think that can happen. Then we jump over on defense. One, I told you guys last week after Auburn did get that big 62-yard touchdown, we got to tackle. We just got to tackle better because it didn't look all that good. Obviously, when you got three guys around a man, and he gets loose and is able to break off for a long run like he did and end up scoring on you. So we got to tackle. Got to tackle good and better. Open space tackles, that's a big deal too. Make the tackles when you got them, obviously. Turnovers is another thing. Still want to see the production value of the turnover come on a little bit more. We got one last week. Would love to see a couple more. Get some interceptions in this game would be fun too, and just have that normal dominant defense that Georgia has week in and week out. I think that's all it's going to take in this game to win it. There's not a ton for me necessarily to have to break down in this game because I just feel like it's a lot of the same stuff year in and year out, and it's been a lot of the same stuff with a couple of these teams that we've been playing this season. Vanderbilt is a team that Georgia should be able to come in here and handle easily. Again, get it going early on offense. Jump off to a big 15. This game was 62 to nothing last year. At the half, what was this game? 35, 42 to nothing at the half. Georgia absolutely steamrolled Vanderbilt in their house. I think it was 28 nothing, if not 35 nothing at the end of the first quarter. It may have been 28 nothing at the end of the first quarter. That's how bad Georgia was beating them, and ends up beating them 62 to nothing. I don't know that this game is necessarily going to be quite that high scoring for Georgia's offense, but if we get it going early, establish that run game, Stetson Bennett starts getting touchdowns through the air again, which, by the way, strangely enough on that, has not done that. Has not done that in a few weeks. Starts the season off in the first 2 or 3 games with 5 touchdowns through the air and has gone cold through the last 3 weeks. But here's a stat that I did want to pull up both offensively and defensively. So give me a second. I'm going to get it pulled up here because I thought this was fairly interesting. Let's start offensively. The SEC passing yard leaders right now. Stetson Bennett is in second place. Even though he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in 3 weeks, he is still in second place behind only Will Rogers, who is also, I think, number 1 in the country as far as passing yards or maybe the efficiency. But that's 2,110 yards for Will Rogers, Right behind him is Stetson Bennett at 1,744, and behind him is Hendon Hooker at 1,432. So Stetson's in good company there. In good company. Rushing yards, and this is kind of a wild thing. Normally, this is where you would see Georgia be on a category. Maybe our passing numbers be lower than that. Nobody on Georgia's offense shows up in the top 10 as SEC's rushing yard leader. Receiving thing, Brock Bowers shows up at 7th in this, 378 so far through the season. And the QBR, Stetson Bennett, is at that 8th spot at 150.25. So that's offensively. But here's something that I wanted to make sure that I mention as well defensively. And this is going to give you a little bit of an insight to the same thing last year. But leadership matters. But it's not about I. It's not about me, even though you can spell me. You can't spell team without me. You can spell team without I. And here it is. SEC total tackles leader. Georgia. No player in the top 10. SEC sack leaders. Georgia. No players in the top 10. SEC solo tackle leaders. Only one guy. That's Jamon Dumas-Johnson, who has come on the scene over the last 3 to 4 weeks and absolutely made a name for himself. 26 solo total tackles. That's tied for 6th. Other than that, Georgia does not show up on a list defensively for the top tackle leaders, for the top sack leaders. But we do have solo tackles, again, Jamon Dumas-Johnson right there. And we have a couple of guys who are right behind him as well. But this is where it goes to, even offensively there. You see Brock, he's on there as a receiving leader. You're going to have that if you have a quarterback. He's the number 2 team in the SEC with the passing yards. That's the only other guy that's putting a stat up there like that. Defensively, and it's been the same thing, it's not an I in team. It is, this team is a team. It's a brotherhood. Everybody's together. And there's not just one man, just like last year. Jordan Davis, he was a name. Nakobe Dean, everybody had a name for themselves. Nolan Smith, Keely Ringo, everybody had a name for themselves. Trayvon Walker, all of these guys made a name for themselves, but all in a defense where they worked together, and it wasn't about individual statistics. And it's the same way this year. I just read it off to you. We don't have a sack leader in the top 10 of the SEC. We don't have a total solo tackles leader. It is a joint effort for the entire team, and you love to see that. You know, there was a little bit of griping back and forth on the sideline against Missouri. We're adjusting to things. And that defense is getting better week in and week out. You saw the guy that, I can't even remember, Kamari Lassiter maybe is who it was that was jawing at another player, and it wasn't him fighting with him. It wasn't that. You saw the other guy sit back and just take the criticism like you're supposed to. It's a leader that's speaking to you, and he's trying to tell you how you need to play in this defense to be successful and to succeed. And obviously, in the end, Georgia ends up pulling that game off. Wasn't as fun through the first half of it, but it is what it is. Georgia still was able to pull that off. So glad to see that. It's not necessarily fun to look and see that no Georgia name pops up on some of those lists, really, as far as the sacks leaders and things like that. But Georgia defensively is still working as a team, as one unit, not just one single player, getting statistics like that up there. And you love to see that, at least knowing that Georgia, hey, they're still taking this thing seriously, but it's not about an individual accolade. It's about teamwork, working together to get the end result, which is Georgia winning, straining on that defense to just strangle other teams. Again, the key on it, tackle, turnovers, dominant defense. You got it week in and week out. Let's make sure that we can do that. Then we get to the pick of the week. I did pick this one, I think, 42 to, Lord, I can't even remember what I picked it at now. I'll get it pulled back up here in a second. 42 to 6, I think is what I ended up with. Let me just make sure. I mean, it's my own pick, and I forgot it just that fast. 48 to 6, excuse me. I think Georgia puts up some good numbers offensively, and we start to strangle that defense again. Vanderbilt's going to give you everything you want. Everything you want. We should be able to throw the ball. We should be able to run the ball easily, effectively in this game. And Georgia, again, defensively, we should be able to lock things down. Again, we hope we see that team for the first 3 weeks, and also this past week against Auburn. We hope we see that team show up, and not the team that showed up against Missouri. Because if the team that showed up against Missouri shows up to this game, I'm not going to say you lose this game, but I don't want to be in a close race against Vanderbilt. No offense to them, but that's just not a game that Georgia should be in at all. That's a game that Georgia should run away with immediately. You don't win that game 62-0 last year and then all of a sudden struggle with it this year. You didn't lose enough production offensively or defensively for that to be the case. So I fully expect Georgia to take care of that. Again, Georgia 48-6 is what I got it picked. We're going to go through some of you guys' picks as well. Coming into this, I wanted to make sure I didn't have anything else offensively or defensively that we needed to run through in the breakdown of this game before we kind of move on. Again, it's only about 15 minutes worth of breaking down this game, but I don't think we need to take too much more time of it. We've got a couple other things that I do want to get to this week before we do that. But let me just look and check. A couple of the injuries, I think we're still looking. A.D. Mitchell, we got to see him on the field last week. We even have seen Arian Smith in flashes as well. Don't know if we're going to have him back 100%. I know Kirby was saying that it's not necessarily his ankle now. He's got a thumb injury that he's battling. So we're going to see if we can see him maybe more in this game. This is also an opportunity not to necessarily have to use some of these guys. You may see them on the field here or there, but there's no sense of re-injuring any guy or anything for a Vandy team that we should be able to take care of easily. I'd love to see some secondary, get some work in this game. Some of our second and third string, backup guys also getting in here and getting reps. And I don't even really like calling them backups because some of our second, even third string guys might as well be starters because they're out there in the first quarter. They're out there in the first couple of drives of the game and making a difference in this game and making a name for themselves. Not only, again, it's not about the individual accolades, but being on the field, having that name recognized. So that's the biggest thing on that. Still don't know about Jalen Carter. That's week to week. It's not really week to week. I think it's multiple weeks out now. So maybe by the time we get to Tennessee coming up in a few weeks, even that Mississippi State game, those two games back-to-back weeks, that's going to matter. That's going to matter a lot when we get to it here in the weeks to come. But, again, picking that one 48-6, Georgia is a 38-point favorite. Let's jump to some of the other games around the country real quick before we jump to the picks of the week. Some of the other big games that are going on around the country. Most of the time I put the big games scrolling across the bottom of the screen if you guys are watching on YouTube. Make sure you guys like the video and subscribe if you have not already. The link to go to the YouTube channel, everything. It's all in the description of the podcast wherever you guys are listening. So the big games around the country. You do have at the 12 o'clock slate on Fox, you got number 10, Penn State, at number 5, Michigan. This is where we get to see, is Penn State for real this season? Or on the other side of that, is Michigan for real? Is Michigan taking this season as seriously as they did last year? Will they show up in a way and show you, hey, we're still here to play ball. Both of these teams undefeated coming into this one. Michigan a 7-point favorite coming into this one as well. Auburn traveling to Ole Miss. Not really a big game in this one. Ole Miss 15-point favorite. That one's at lunchtime as well. Not one to sleep on here. Number 19, 5-1. Number 19, Kansas traveling to Oklahoma. Oklahoma 9-point favorite, oddly, in this game. 9-point favorite after coming off that blowout loss in the Red River BB gun game against Texas. I don't understand that one. I feel like Kansas should run away with it, but I'm not sure. There's some other things that could maybe play a factor into that. The big one at 3:30. This game's going on at the same time Georgia Vanderbilt is. I wish both of these teams could lose, but even though I wish that, it doesn't mean I'm not going to be flipping back and forth to see what's going on. When Georgia's on a commercial break, you best believe most everybody's going to be tuning in to see what happens with this Alabama-Tennessee game. We're going to talk about it. Some of this matters a lot as far as picks go for who is playing in what. Because if quarterbacks made a big difference in games last week, could in this one as well. If Bryce Young's not playing in this game, this is a really good opportunity for Tennessee to win this game. If he is, I don't think Tennessee stands a chance. We'll talk about it some more coming up. That is also at 3:30, number 3 versus number 6 there in Alabama and Tennessee. In Knoxville, Tennessee, that's where game day is. Number 8, Oklahoma State, undefeated 5-0, traveling to undefeated number 13, TCU. That one also at 3:30. TCU a 4-point favorite. Top 25 matchup in the ACC. You got number 15, NC State, traveling to number 18, Syracuse. That one at 3:30 as well. Our friends over in Statesboro, Georgia Southern, hosting number 25, James Madison. James Madison, a 12-point favorite, headed to Southern on this one. Number 4, Clemson, undefeated, obviously 6-0, traveling to FSU, 4-2 on the season. Clemson, 3.5-point favorite. This is one to circle in the ACC right here. I think this is going to be a big-time game, a chance for Florida State to ruin what Clemson is trying to make happen this season. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't think Florida State's a bad team. I think Florida State's been fighting all year. This is an opportunity again to ruin what Clemson is, being at that 4 spot and undefeated, because I think if Clemson loses this season, I don't think they get into the playoffs. We'll see another big one in the SEC here. Number 16, Mississippi State traveling to number 22, Kentucky. Mississippi State a 4-point favorite on the road. And then finally, number 7, USC traveling to number 20, Utah. Utah at home, a 3.5-point favorite against the undefeated USC Trojans. Sorry, you're just going to have to deal with it. Got to have something to drink there. That's the big games around the country. Let's get to some of the picks that are going on in this game as well, or in this week. Excuse me. It's not week 6. It's week 7. Every week I put this thing up and I completely forget to change the actual week that it is in here. But this is the picks. This is the way I've got it picked this week. Georgia with the win versus Vandy. That 38's a little bit scary. Again, some of that just depends on who shows up. Again, even if the Georgia of Missouri game shows up and this game ends, 38-10, that's still a big win, but it doesn't cover. So I'm not going to take the spread on this one. Plus, when I don't take the spread against Georgia, we seem to cover the spread, and that's still a win in the book. Then I got Mississippi State traveling to Kentucky. Give me Mississippi State and -4. I think they absolutely steamroll Kentucky. Even if Will Levis is back in this game, I don't think it matters. Mississippi State and Will Rogers are absolutely rolling right now, and I think they take care of business in Lexington. Then Ole Miss at Auburn. Ole Miss, even though it's on the road, a little bit of a slap in the face. That first half against Vandy last week, I think they bounce back from that in a big way and take down Auburn on the Plains pretty heavily. Give me Ole Miss with the win and minus that 15 as well. Now here's the one I'll put kind of an asterisk by, or this will be, it's a toss-up. Alabama at Tennessee. And I want to talk about it just for a minute here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. This is Georgia podcast. I get it. You guys want to hear about Georgia. You don't really care about Alabama. Trust me. I get that. But this is still one of the biggest games in the country. This is also a huge game in the SEC. And a lot of this is going to depend on a lot of different things. Alabama, good football team, struggled last week against Texas A&M, who is not a very good football team. Tennessee has looked very good all season with blemishes here and there. Not on the record, but blemishes that didn't necessarily look all that great. But they still have looked really good, and they've looked the part. Here's the thing. If Bryce Young is not the quarterback in this game, if he's not playing in this game, and Milroe is the guy who has to make it happen, I don't know that Alabama wins it. Now, The turnaround to that is Tennessee also has one of the worst pass defenses in the country. And Milroe plays on offense. The biggest thing is he can't really throw the ball, but if Tennessee's still giving up 48 points to Alabama with Milroe throwing the ball, the biggest thing is they've got to score as well. And Alabama's defense is not that bad. Alabama does have a good defense. But I think this is where I'm going to put it. If Bryce Young plays this game, I think Alabama wins, and I think they cover the 7. If he does not play, I don't know who wins, so I'm not going to put that. I'm just going to say Tennessee covers that 7. That's where the slash in there is. And part of me wants to take Tennessee in it, but I don't know. Again, Tennessee has not won. I've seen some crazy tweets. Tennessee has not been able to tweet or send an iMessage or a bunch of other things. FaceTime anybody after a win against Alabama, because none of that stuff existed the last time Tennessee beat Alabama. 15 years. 15 years is how long that's been. Hey, Florida and Kentucky, they have, a 30-year streak before Kentucky was finally able to get over it. I don't know that this lasts that long. I think eventually it has to come to an end. This year is as good of a year as any, and I will say something that's going to kind of pivot into what we're about to jump into, which is looking back at the preseason predictions for teams. The only loss I have Alabama having this season is at Tennessee. That's the only loss I have Alabama this season, going 11-1, still finishing number 1 in the SEC West, but it's at Tennessee, and it's this game. And that's because, again, preseason, I thought Tennessee's going to be a pretty good team. I still think they finished second, and we're going to jump into that in a second. But I still think Tennessee, as much as it pains me to say it, I think Tennessee's they're a good football team. Hendon Hooker's the real deal. There's a reason he has Heisman hype around him right now. And this is an opportunity for Tennessee, not necessarily to spoil what Alabama has, because Alabama, again, can still win the SEC West, still contend in the SEC championship game. Tennessee still has to get past Georgia, and I think that's still a big thing to ask. So a lot to see what's coming in this game, but there's no sense in trying to overlook this game, no matter how much you dislike either of them, because this is a huge game that may not necessarily determine the SEC, but it's definitely going to determine some possibility of playoff predictions coming up in a little while as well. So that leads me to the next part, which is looking at we've got our picks there. Obviously, last week 5-1, much better week last week. Hopefully, we can keep that thing going. Looking back at what we saw for preseason, and I can't get my page for whatever reason. It's not there that I thought was there, but preseason at Georgia finishing first, Tennessee second. I think only one loss on Tennessee's schedule if I look. No, I actually had them losing at LSU because I thought that was going to be tougher, but I also thought that could be a night game. So I was wrong about that at 10-2, but there's still the possibility they go 10-2. I doubt it, though. I doubt it. It looks very difficult unless they lost here and then at Georgia. If they lose to Bama and Georgia, obviously that's probably a 10-2 finish, more than likely. So I've got them finishing 10-2, still second in the SEC East. Kentucky at third, right behind them, and I still think that looks to be shaping up that way. Florida still doesn't look all that great to me this year. Is what it is. Missouri, I still think should finish bottom of the SEC. Probably not now after they've all of a sudden started to look a little bit better. I think Vanderbilt still edges by them. So that's what the East looks like. West, I still had Alabama losing one game. That would be this one this week. We'll see. That's a preseason prediction. Not saying that's what happens, but it's the only loss I have them for this season. If it happens or not, I don't know. I've got them 11-1, still finishing first. Actually had Arkansas finishing second. I was wrong about that. Arkansas is not as good this year as I thought they would be. I thought offensively they still had weapons to possibly keep things going. They don't, but I still thought defensively they could stop some teams, and all of a sudden their defense is not very good. I thought they were going to be much better this season and improve on what they've done the past couple of years. That unfortunately has not happened. Mississippi State I didn't have as good as they are this season. But I've always believed in Will Rogers. I think they still stand a really good chance. What did I have them? 6-7 on the year. They're not going to go 6-7. They're much better than that. But I did have Ole Miss finishing second in this at 11-2 and Texas A&M at 10-2. Obviously not happening. So we can scratch that. But the Ole Miss 10-2, that's still the possibility of a good season. Only losing to Arkansas as well as Texas A&M. So I actually have Ole Miss beating Alabama. Nope, sorry. I have them losing to Alabama, not Arkansas. Winning Arkansas the week after that. So that's kind of what my preseason looked as far as in the SEC. Some of these things still have chances to come true. Georgia, I had 12-0, winning every game this season, and I still think that's on the table. I think Tennessee and Mississippi State are the only two that are going to give you that run for the money later on to the year. I'm not nearly as concerned about Kentucky now after seeing how they played without Will Levis in that game against South Carolina last week. Not to say that Will Levis doesn't light a flame under himself after losing that game and come back and try to prove a point playing throughout the rest of the season. We'll see. But I still think Georgia stands a good chance to go 12-0, win the East, play Alabama in the West for the SEC championship game. Let's look at the preseason playoff prediction, what I had that I did actually pull up. This is from earlier in the season. This is how I had it ending. At the end of the season, going into the college football playoff, I had Ohio State playing Alabama, 1 versus 4. Georgia versus Clemson. Right now, that's your top 4. That's your top 4 minus the positioning. Obviously, Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Alabama 3, and Clemson 4. This is what I had at preseason. I still think there's a chance for this to happen. I don't really know how it lines up right now with Georgia being 1, Ohio State being 2, Alabama 3, Clemson 4. Michigan has snuck in there and obviously been in that top 4 for a little while, but obviously Ohio State and Michigan having to play at the very end of the season probably determines a lot of where these numbers end up. But I still think there's the chance that, maybe Georgia plays a tight game with another team they shouldn't, or maybe Ohio State looks really, really good against a very good and elite team at some point that puts Ohio State in that 1 spot. I still think Georgia goes on and beats Alabama in the SEC championship game, but I think that's Alabama, if they don't lose a game this season, or if they lose to Tennessee, it probably takes them out if they were to lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game. But I still think Georgia winning that and Alabama not having a loss coming into this one would put them in the 4 spot. They're not going to make this a rematch of 1 versus 4 in the SEC. It's a lot like last year. Georgia didn't win it, but they were still in that 3 spot, and that's kind of how things lined up. But then Clemson, I still think, even though I think they've got a test this week on the road against FSU, I still think this is a chance for Clemson to still win the ACC and just be sitting there as a shoe-in, even though not really having been tested or played a very difficult game. They may not play their toughest game until they get to a college football playoff if they go undefeated and win the ACC. So that's the preseason picture. I haven't changed it. I could probably do a little bit of maneuvering, but I think this is a good week to get into the bye week next week before we maybe run back through that and see kind of how we look or feel about it. And by the way, next week I'm also going to try to have Hunter back on as a guest, and we'll see if we can kind of run over some fun stuff and just talk about football from the hoop, on a bye week. Give us some good stuff to talk about. So that's recapping the playoff prediction. Let's go into some of the Twitter polls that I did put up earlier this week and any kind of Twitter conversation that you guys have. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at DogTalk20. You guys can see it up there in the corner if you're watching on YouTube. Again, please like the video and subscribe if you have not already. I greatly appreciate that. Getting to a couple of the polls on the week, one of which did actually end up tied up, which kind of stinks when that happened. A couple of them, okay, I lied. Almost all of them ended up tied. So prediction on the week did have a couple others. At its dog time, 55-3. Hey, that's a good day. That's a good day. Give me another touchdown and hold them to 1 less field goal on that one. 48-6 again was my prediction in this one. Do the Dogs shut out Vandy on Saturday? 50-50. 50-50 going with yes or obviously no. At J. Lewis Austin, we'll give up 6 points probably. Again, I agree with you there. I think 48-6 is what mine ends up on it. And then we go to Stetson Bennett total touchdowns versus Vandy. 0-1s, 20%. And then we got 40% for both of these next two, 2-3 and 4+. So I don't know. I could very well see 2 touchdown passes, 2 rushing touchdowns in this one to get to that 4 mark. But it's kind of hard. I mean, this could have been one I should have maybe done an over or under at 3 or 3.5 and seen if we could get a little bit better result. Dogs rushing yards versus Vandy. Less than 250 gets 44%. More than 250 gets 56%. I do not know. I think Vandy's given up like 198, so or 324. No, that's passing yards. I'll be curious to see if Stetson actually ends up getting that number. That would be a fun thing to see there. But I don't think they're giving up quite that on the ground. But I still think Georgia could easily run that up. And that's because of this. Leading rusher versus Vandy. Kenny Mack, Dejon Edwards, Branson Robinson. I only put these three on here because I still believe Kendall Milton. He's somebody I forgot to mention as far as the injuries go. Don't know if he's going to be back in this one battling that groin issue that he had last week. This is a good opportunity to rest him, give him the bye week to rest too, come back healthy against Florida, ready to rock and roll. But Kenny Mack, Dejon Edwards, Branson Robinson, leading rushers for Vandy. 52% go with Dejon, 29% Branson. All of a sudden, one of our starters here, and Kenny Mack only getting 19%. Kenny Mack's the starter. He's going to be the guy who's going to come out there and get the first reps of this season, or this game, excuse me. Also, the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest backfield receiver in the country right now. I don't know that there's one better than Kenny Mack, unfortunately battling a little bit of injury over the past couple of weeks, couple of weeks ago. So hopefully he can bounce back from that and just continue to be just an offensive weapon for us outside of just the run game. Leading receiver versus Vandy, we got Brock Bowers, Lab McConkey, Darnell Washington, or other. Comment who. 63% of you guys going with Brock, 38% on Lad on this one. Maybe. We'll see. I'd love to see Darnell Washington and some of these other guys get some touches in this one. I also think we're going to see Carson Beck get into this game. I think we're going to see a heavy dose of him in the second half. We'll be interested to see if we can't see him get a touchdown pass or two as well in this game. That'd be great. Upsets of the week, we got Tennessee over Bama, Penn State over Michigan, FSU over Clemson. 42% of you guys going with Penn State over Michigan, 41% going with FSU over Clemson, only 17% with Tennessee over Bama. I get it. I understand that. Definitely get it. So, that'll pretty much wrap us up there, guys. Again, really appreciate you guys listening. I'm looking forward to checking out this game this weekend, 3:30. Seeing if old Dandy Vandy can come in here and try to give Georgia a run for the money. Don't really anticipate this being much of a game that Georgia's going to have to worry about again. I think Georgia can get in here, start things early, fast, hard, running the ball, throwing the ball, all over Vandy. I'm looking forward to that. Also checking some of these other games out around the country. Make sure you guys, wherever you guys are listening on podcasts, you make sure you guys subscribe. If you guys want to support the show, there's always a link in the description. Hit that link tree. It will take you to the YouTube channel, wherever you guys want to listen, Instagram, Twitter, all of the things. Just give it a click and follow it there. Make sure you guys give us that 5-star review wherever you're listening as well, and I will make sure I read it on an upcoming episode. Go Dogs.